I suppose just kind of moving on, just thinking about what we were discussing earlier on about the whole, the questions, the recovery kind of. There's been a lot of, I suppose, there's been a lot of recovery rhetoric, isn't there? And I suppose, do you think the rhetoric that's been around, especially coming from, say from the UK and elsewhere, do you think that's causing divisions in the areas?
I think yes. I think there is a degree to which that is the case, and it's. I think there is a degree to which any change in direction, which is as profound as the shift from harm reduction to recovery, or indeed at the early stages of harm reduction, the shift from treating drug users as individuals who needed psychiatric care to the development of harm reduction. Any major schism in the orthodoxy or the establishment of that kind, of that level, has I think certain regrettable elements to it, and it's arguable whether or not you can ever change something without there being a fairly profound shift in the language. So I think that recovery, there is a certain ferocity now in the language of recovery, and I'm sure that it makes many people uncomfortable, and a feeling that suddenly the solidity of the terrain upon which they've been working for many years is almost being torn asunder, that now the whole language is about recovery, and a feeling that, well, how do I talk about what I'm doing in terms of harm reduction if actually everyone now is only talking about recovery? And that is must be profoundly unsettling, and it will have very non-productive elements to that if it leads people to lose a sense of confidence in what they're doing. But there is a degree which I would say that it's probably impossible to shift an orthodoxy in an incremental and consensual way. But I think now the challenge is, in a sense, to rebuild or to build some of the bridges that were undermined previously when the language shifted dramatically. But I was looking at some of the recent statements. There's a report that was issued recently by the UK government on the road to full recovery, which and it's a fairly, one could almost say it's quite a dogmatic statement about the importance of abstinence and recovery. And I was looking at an open letter that was recently sent to the government departments that authored that, an open letter signed by many harm reduction supporters. And the gulf that sits between the content of the full recovery report and the contents of this letter, which is basically saying there's nothing of value really in that report. It's going to cause profound harm. It's going to result in an increase in deaths and illness amongst drug users, etc., etc. So I think that there is still a massive divide between some of the more programmatic statements on the recovery side and, in a sense, the equally programmatic statements on the harm reduction side. And I would hope that in the middle ground of, but what are services actually doing with clients, that neither of those rather more dogmatic positions impact greatly on what are you actually going to do with the client that you're working with at the moment.